Welcome to the Horror Hour, where your darkest fears come to life. Each episode delves into spine-chilling tales, eerie phenomena, and the unsettling unknown. Join me as we explore the stories that make your skin crawl and your imagination race. Turn down the lights and let the horror begin.
Subterranean terror. The rumble came without warning. A deep, bone-shaking tremor that reverberated through the steel veins of the city. In the bowels of the earth, the subway train lurched violently, sending passengers tumbling into a chaotic dance of terror. Screams echoed off the metallic walls, a cacophony that soon drowned in the roar of the quake. In the heart of the train, John Mitchell gripped the pole, his knuckles white. The shaking was relentless, each jolt throwing him off balance. Around him, the scene was apocalyptic. Seats were upended, luggage scattered, and people flung about like rag dolls. A pregnant woman nearby clutched her belly, eyes wide with fear, while an elderly man desperately prayed aloud. "Hold on," John shouted, though his voice was barely audible over the cacophony. The train screeched to a halt, its momentum stilled but the tremors persisting, rattling every inch of the metal carriage. As the shaking subsided, a heavy silence fell. It was then that a new horror began to seep in. Water, dark, murky water, began to creep through the gaps in the floor, slowly but inexorably. The source was unknown, but the rising tide was unmistakable. Panic flared as people scrambled to escape the encroaching flood. John's attempts to get to the emergency exits were futile. They were jammed, warped by the quake. The water, now ankle-deep, surged with menacing swiftness. The lights flickered erratically, casting long, eerie shadows that danced like specters along the tunnel walls. In the midst of the chaos, Emily Hart, a young journalist on her way to cover a story, found herself trapped between two seats, her arm pinned. She struggled to free herself, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. A chilling realization dawned on her. Some of the passengers were not just afraid. They were injured, trapped, or worse. The screech of metal and the crackle of electricity filled the air as water reached the exposed wiring. Sparks flew, and screams erupted as people were electrocuted by the live currents that had shorted out in the deluge. The water turned a sickly shade of electric blue, pulsing with deadly energy. As the water rose to knee level, the train began to shudder and groan, an ominous sign that it was not just the quake that was causing the trouble. John, Emily, and a few others managed to force open an emergency exit. They clambered out, only to find themselves in a submerged and twisted wreckage of the train. The tunnel was unrecognizable. Parts of it had collapsed, and the water continued to rise. They saw the remnants of their fellow passengers, some still clinging to the wreckage, others floating lifelessly in the brackish water. The only sound was the occasional groan of settling debris and the distant echoes of the quake's aftershocks. It was a scene from a nightmare. Among the survivors was Daniel Lee, a former Marine with a rugged demeanor, and Clara, a schoolteacher who had been visiting her students. The group, consisting of John, Emily, Daniel, Clara, and a teenage boy named Jason, formed an uneasy alliance. They were united by a common goal: survival. As they ventured through the submerged tunnels, they faced new horrors. The water had brought with it a plethora of dangers: sharp debris hidden beneath the surface, unseen currents pulling at their legs, and the ever-present threat of further structural collapse. The tunnels seemed to shift and close in on them, the quake having twisted and warped the very pathways they depended on. At one point, they encountered a pocket of air where they could catch their breath. Clara, who had been calm and collected until now, broke down, revealing her deep fear. Daniel, trying to keep morale up, told them stories of his experiences, though his voice trembled with fatigue. The survivors discovered an emergency access tunnel that led to a maintenance shaft, an uncertain escape route but their best chance. As they navigated the narrow passage, the walls seemed to close in, and the air grew colder. They stumbled upon a room filled with old, rusted machinery. Here, their hopes were dashed when they realized the machinery was malfunctioning, its gears locked in place by years of disuse. Desperation set in. Water began seeping into the maintenance shaft, and the survivors fought against rising panic. Daniel and John worked feverishly to get the machinery working, while Emily and Clara searched for an alternative route. Just as hope seemed lost, the machinery groaned to life, opening a new passage. They scrambled through it, emerging into a partially flooded service room. Through a shattered window, they saw the surface world, drenched and damaged, but accessible. The survivors emerged from the wreckage of the subway into a city transformed by the earthquake. The once bustling metropolis was now a landscape of devastation and chaos. They were among the lucky few who had survived the subterranean nightmare. In the days that followed, their stories of survival and horror became the stuff of legend. The subway system was closed indefinitely, its flooded tunnels and twisted wreckage a grim reminder of the disaster. John, Emily, Daniel, Clara, and Jason carried their scars, both physical and psychological, as they faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives in a world forever changed. The city would eventually recover, but the darkness of the subway would remain an indelible mark on its collective memory, a reminder of the unseen horrors that lurk beneath the surface, waiting for the next tremor to unleash their terror.